Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a deep dive into this Penn State program and talking about two things. One, what we saw from Penn State in the bowl game against Ole Miss, and more importantly for Penn State fans, heading into the offseason, heading into that 2024 season, what needs to change specifically within this offense to kind of take that next step. And this is a team that we've talked about a lot in terms of they're not that far off. I mean, this was a defense last year that was a national championship caliber defense. That defense is going to be very good next year too. If this offense takes some strides, this becomes a team that is extremely dangerous in the college football playoffs. Want to talk about what needs to happen? Transfer portal targets, obviously a new offensive coordinator coming in. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. This has been truly a blast of the last couple of weeks, tracking offseason moves, coaching moves. The amount of support you guys have shown, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And for Penn State fans, would love to hear from you guys in terms of what you would like to see change within this offense, whether it's from a schematic standpoint, whether it's from a transfer portal personnel standpoint. We'll chop it up there, Dill. Going to give you the T-box here. And I want to start with evaluating what we saw from Penn State on offense, specifically Drew Allar against Ole Miss yesterday.
Evaluating Drew Allar, I should say, for this whole season, it's just so hard because at the end of the day, I don't think he played incredibly well for the most part, especially in those bigger games, obviously. But just given what they had in their offense, given some of the limited abilities they had at the wide receiver spot, and frankly, what their offensive coordinator was doing, and there's a reason he got fired. I don't think that just came out of nowhere. So it's really hard to evaluate him. I just can't wait to see him and Coach Kotelnicki. I think Coach Kotelnicki is one of the best offensive coordinators we've seen in a long time. How dynamic he was able to make that Kansas offense with kind of a limited personnel, obviously, compared to most of the Big 12 teams they played. It's just so impressive, and I can't wait to see what he does in, frankly, a Penn State team that's far more talented than what Kansas had.
So starting with Drew, and I've seen a lot of Penn State fans, you even said this before we went live, I wouldn't mind seeing a quarterback competition heading into 2024. And my answer to that would be, sure, the competition can take place. Drew is the guy that gives this team the highest ceiling heading into 2024. Like you've seen, there's a reason he was a 5-star coming out of high school. You've seen the flashes of the arm talent that he has. I think it comes down to confidence. And I think it comes down to a couple different things. One, he just seems to not be clicking with this offense, but I think a lot of it has to do with what you said, right? You look at how that offense is run and the schematics of it. There's just not a ton of aggression down the field. There's not a lot of wrinkles in this offense that allow them to hit explosive plays. And then you look at it from a personnel standpoint, the wide receiver play was not nearly good enough to win a Big Ten championship, to win a national championship. The goals that Penn State fans have, you look at the numbers, though. I mean, Condre Lambert-Smith was your leading receiver. And then after that, you had Warren, Theo Johnson, and Singleton as your next receivers that were leading the team. So your wide receiver, too, was Cephas, who had less than 250 yards on the year receiving. That tells you just the lack of playmaking ability that you had in this wide receiver room in 2023.
And frankly, I think that tells you a lot. I think it tells you probably do need to go in the portal to get some wide receivers. But I also think that, it tells you a lot about the scheme, and that's why you kind of like just thinking about comparing how Kansas played Illinois to how Penn State played Illinois. And again, Kansas, less talent, doesn't recruit the same way Penn State has, just not programmed on the same level. But you just see how much they were able to open up that defense and like hit explosive plays, use plays in sequence, like run a screen, run a quick slant, and then hit something off of it. There's just like a rhythm and ability that Coach Kotelnicki and that Kansas offense had to kind of, again, put teams in conflict and open it up a little bit that you just never saw from Penn State, who constantly looked like they were playing offense in a phone booth. I mean, it was
that's the spacing of the Penn State offense in terms of like trying to get their playmakers the football in space. It was, as bad as it gets from it. And I think a lot of Penn State fans who watched all 13 games this season know it now. Let me cook a little bit with Coach Kotelnicki. This is a guy that if you've listened to me talk this Kansas football team, there is not an offensive coordinator I love more than what he has done with Kansas the last 2 years. And you said it best. One, an elite play caller in terms of dialing up plays at the right time, which Penn State, they always tried to throw in these gadget plays. They never worked, right? When Kansas goes to them, one, they work, but more importantly, the schematics of the offense, it's all about putting the defense in conflict. right? Trying to get defensive eyes wandering in the backfield and then getting guys in space. And one of the things that Penn State just never did a good job of is getting your playmakers the football in space and letting them go make plays. And then you look at what Coach Kotelnicki does and what he thrived off with Kansas is, hey, we're going to get our playmakers the football in space and let them work after the catch. And they had a ton of success, and I'm looking for them to do that in 2024. That's going to help Drew and his confidence, right? When you have just easier throws where you're letting the playmakers around you help a young quarterback out, that's what you want. I think Penn State asked Drew to sit in a pocket and deliver balls to wide receivers that couldn't create any separation. And I think that led to just kind of a lack of confidence with Drew. And I think most Penn State fans see the capabilities that Drew has, but you also see him on the sideline looking like a deer in the headlights. Like, this dude just doesn't have enough confidence. And I think a lot of it, yes, he needs to play better, but I think a lot of it comes from the offense and the talent around him just not really putting it together.
Well, you just never really saw, like what you said, like an answer to anything. I mean, there's only so many times you can run a tight end tunnel screen and say that's like our wrinkle, that's our go-to play. It just, there was no variety. It felt like there was no answer, and you just never had that play where like you leaked a running back out of the backfield and hit a big play on these really good defenses, or you never really had that tight end come off of a formation that guys thought he was going to stay in and block and hit a big play like you saw Ole Miss do once or twice to Penn State and kind of hit those big game-changing plays. There just never was that sort of play in this Penn State offense. And again, it's so hard to evaluate Drew because when you can't just ever manufacture a single yard, aside from having your wide receiver go win a one-on-one battle, which obviously they weren't doing enough of against those big dog teams, it's just really hard to play quarterback in that kind of style system. And I don't blame him for like maybe not having the confidence, just because when you aren't getting first downs, you're going 3 and out as often as they do against those bigger teams. It's really hard to get that rhythm, that motivation, or not.
That's
motivation.
Another thing you made a good point. Like, Penn State just struggled to stay on the field this year in those big games, like the 3 and out. So how do you expect a young quarterback to get some sort of confidence and rhythm when you can't stay on the football field? The one thing I'm looking at, and Penn State fans certainly know this, we talked about it all season, the lack of explosiveness. You look at Penn State, yes, they were top 20 in points per game, scoring over 35 points per game. That's a nice stat. The number that has held Penn State back is, what's your yards per play? What's your yards per pass attempt? It's not very high, right? 6.7 yards per pass attempt. That was 86th in the country. And you look at yards per play, 5.5 yards per play, 64th in the country. Those numbers are not going to get you to a national championship. They're not going to elevate you to beat Michigan and Ohio State within the Big Ten. All right, let's go take a look at Kansas. Like you said, less talent around him. Coach Kotelnicki in 2023 with Kansas, 10.1 yards per pass attempt, number 2 in the country. 7 yards per play, number 7 in the country. This Kansas team was a master at hitting the explosive play, and that's what Penn State needs. It's 2 or 3 or 4 of those explosive plays in a game against Ohio State or against Michigan that can kind of give you the edge. And I think Kansas showed they could do that, and you're hoping Coach Kotelnicki can bring that success that he had with Kansas and implement it at Penn State. And if they do that, I mean, this is a team that can be extremely dangerous in 2024.
And that goes into like the next part of what we were going to talk about is having those guys who can go do it. And I know the number one guy, we've been talking about this for a while now, is Julian Fleming. And that, again, obviously at Ohio State, his numbers don't jump off the board at you. And that's simply more of a function of having 4 first-round talents in his whole career, essentially playing above him at most points. But you've seen enough moments where he goes and wins those one-on-one battles, takes a back shoulder route, catches it through traffic, hits a 30-yard play on a 3rd and 9. Like that type of play, again, you didn't see that from Penn State. And additionally, he's got the athleticism and size to go make plays down the field. Another issue that Penn State had where teams didn't need to play like a too high look against Penn State because there wasn't anyone on that team who could go make that play down the field.
James Franklin said in his post-game presser, like, we don't have guys. He didn't say it as bluntly as I'm saying it, but this was essentially what he was saying was, we don't have guys on the outside that scare defenses. And when you don't have that, it gets so much easier to scheme against an offense. You put a safety. Yeah, you're right. We don't have to have 2 high safeties because y'all haven't showed the ability to separate and make plays down the field. So you're trying to get this run game going, running into a loaded box. It is so hard for an offense to function. Julian Fleming's a guy that can bring that.
Again, that just contributes to what we talked about. Not only can you not hit the ball down the field, you can't like kind of put teams in conflict. And that just all of that all kind of comes together and playing that phone booth style of offense that you've seen too much of in what's been so hard. And that's what you talk about. You look at a guy like Fleming, he certainly has that talent and that potential to give you something to kind of open it up and just look smoother and make it easier on Drew Allar at the end of the day.
Yeah, Julian Fleming, I think, immediately comes in and is the wide receiver one in this offense. And you said it best. Like I've seen Penn State fans, I've seen other college football fans write off Julian Fleming as if he wasn't playing in a wide receiver room with Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-the-Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., all four of which are going to or have gone top 20 in the NFL draft. The next guy I want to talk about, and another one of those that we talked about, just Penn State didn't have, is that guy that, hey, we need to play. It's 3rd and 5. We need to extend this drive. Who's going to get open to create separation and make a play? Jamal Banks was that guy for Wake Forest the last 2 years, over 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns. The number I have circled here, 35 first down catches. When Wake Forest needed a play in 2023 and in 2022, Jamal Banks was the guy. And I think he comes into this Penn State offense and could be the guy for Penn State as well. And again, they hadn't had a guy like that who can make those plays. I think Jamal Banks certainly could be that guy. And Dill, the last guy, I snuck this one in on you, but I know you know him and I know you like him. Brashard Smith, coming over from Miami. He just hit the transfer portal 2 days ago. You talk about Coach Koldenicki and what he wants to do in terms of getting his guys the ball in space and letting them go be playmakers. I can't think of a better fit in this offense than Brashard Smith coming over from Miami.
I mean, he's that type of guy who forces that like heavy flow. Like when linebackers and safeties see him run out there to catch a swing pass, you got to go track him down. Because again,
Yes.
if he catches that and you're not right on him, it's way too fast, way too explosive. Again, you didn't really see a ton of him at Miami, but the moments you saw of him, I mean, he was taking.
Which was asinine. That's why he's transferring. He's not transferring because he couldn't crack. He just didn't get the opportunities he should have. And if you put him in this Coach Koldenicki offense, man, I mean, you talk about a guy, and that's another like aspect of Penn State that you didn't really have, right? Like in years past, you've had guys like Hamler, Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington, I'd even throw into that, where they can make plays after the catch and be extremely dynamic in space. There wasn't that guy that we're trying to force feed because they're different and they're playmakers. They didn't have a guy like that. I think Brashard Smith could be that guy. Is he that wide receiver one like Julian Fleming or Jamal Banks? Probably not. But he's that guy, like you said. When he has the football in space, you got to go respect it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. To me, I think they need to bring in some guy who at the end of the day can win one-on-one man coverage matchups, force teams to maybe play a little bit of different defense. I don't know. You kind of look back at that Ole Miss game. It felt like they were in zone or man-to-man coverage pretty much most of that game. And when you don't have guys who can win or be threats like what Trey Smith was, or the wide receiver, sorry, I'm blanking on his name for Ole Miss, but what he was able to do when he was one-on-one.
Trey Harris. We need a Trey Harris in this offense.
Like you need a Trey Harris. Sorry. Like that's the type of guy who just, again, he makes you play defense differently. He makes you, if you're going to play one single, like high man-to-man coverage, he's going to have a very good chance of winning. And you didn't have that with Penn State. It didn't force defenses to be particularly creative. They were just able to play that man-to-man ultra press coverage, and you just didn't see enough winning. So when you are able to bring in, frankly, a guy like Julian Fleming and Jamal Banks, some guy who makes it is a really difficult matchup in that one-on-one coverage, and then you can complement him with somebody who can make a play, I think you can see a much more improved offense. And that, to me, is why when you talk about it like, oh, we might need to go find a new quarterback or do this or do that, I don't know if I see that. If you can set him up or set Drew Allar up a little better, I think you can still be a really good offense. And frankly, he does give you that higher ceiling than almost anyone else.
100%. The number one goal for Penn State heading into the offseason, getting this offense right around Drew. Like if you can do that, this team is going to be dangerous. And I think James Franklin, yes, you've already done it with the offensive coordinator. Now you got to go get the personnel. And you do that, this is an offense that's going to look different in 2024. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.